The knife that hurts you the most is held by someone you once called a friend. Law number 2. Never put too much trust in friends, learn how to use enemies. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Niccolo Machiavelli. Trust is comforting. It makes us feel safe, connected, and emotionally grounded. From childhood, we're taught to build alliances, surround ourselves with friends, and rely on those we've known the longest. The idea of distrusting your closest allies feels cynical, even cruel. But when it comes to power, business, leadership, or any game with real stakes, trust is not a virtue, it's a risk. Law number 2 cuts straight through the romantic illusion we build around friendship. It doesn't say, don't have friends. It says, don't trust them blindly. It's a brutal awakening, the kind that only life can teach through betrayal. But you don't need to learn this lesson the hard way. If you understand what's underneath the surface of this law, the friend paradox. Friends are familiar. That familiarity feels like a shortcut to loyalty. But paradoxically, the people closest to you often make the most dangerous enemies. Why? Because you underestimate them. Because they know your patterns. Because you trust that they will never cross the line. Until they do. Think of how many leaders, CEOs, politicians, and creators were brought down by someone from their inner circle. Rarely is it the stranger who deals the most damaging blow. It's the best friend, the business partner, the childhood companion, the brother. In their desire to protect that bond, people ignore red flags. They make excuses. They offer second, third, fourth chances. And by the time they realize the cost, it's too late. This is why law number 2 doesn't just suggest caution, it demands it. What this law really means. Let's be clear. This law is not about turning into a paranoid recluse. It's about choosing your allies with clarity, not comfort. There are 3 key principles embedded in this law. 1. Familiarity breeds entitlement. Friends may start to feel like they deserve special treatment, not because of merit, but because of history. They might unconsciously expect favors, loyalty, or protection regardless of how they behave. 2. Loyalty has limits. When tensions rise or opportunities emerge, friendship often gives way to self-interest. A friend who feels overshadowed or left behind may turn bitter. Power can ignite envy, especially among peers. 3. Enemies are useful. Enemies, unlike friends, don't operate under illusion. Their motives are clear. Their behavior is calculable. They have something to prove. And when guided, that can be transformed into something powerful. Respect, competence, and results. This is the real twist of law number 2. Enemies often make better allies than friends. The psychology behind it. Friendship is based on emotional bonds. Power is built on strategic leverage. These are 2 different games, and playing one by the rules of the other is a fatal mistake. When you rise in influence, visibility, or success, your friends may feel threatened by your growth, feel excluded from your decision-making, feel like they're owed something for being there since day one. You might not even notice the shift until it's too late. That passive-aggressive message, that backhanded compliment, that missed deadline, that friend who leaks your idea or undermines you behind your back. Meanwhile, the enemy, the rival, operates with different energy. They don't pretend to be on your side. But if you convert that rivalry into collaboration, you unlock something powerful. Mutual respect, hunger to prove oneself, performance over politics. This is not wishful theory. It's a pattern that has played out in empires, boardrooms, and battlefields for centuries. The seduction of loyalty. Many people cling to the idea that loyalty is sacred, but loyalty isn't given. It's earned and maintained. One of the biggest traps in personal or professional life is confusing length of relationship with depth of alignment. You've known someone for 10 years? Great. But do they still share your vision? You used to be inseparable? Fine. But are they evolving with you or resenting your growth? Too many people drag dead weight with them out of guilt, comfort, or fear. They don't want to abandon their friends, even when those friends are quietly sabotaging them. You don't need to cut everyone off, but you do need to see clearly. And law number 2 forces that clarity. Why this law still matters, especially today. We live in an era where relationships are currency. People constantly say, your network is your net worth. And they're not wrong. But they also don't tell you that mismanaged loyalty is one of the fastest ways to lose power. Influencers build teams of friends and fall apart when betrayal hits. Startups hire co-founders out of nostalgia and collapse from inner conflict. Leaders promote old allies and fail to see how power shifts change people. Today, your survival depends not just on who you know, but how you use that network. And sometimes, it means letting go of the illusion that friendship equals safety. This law is hard to swallow. People resist this law. They call it heartless, cold, manipulative. But if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted blindly, you know the pain is deeper than any enemy could cause. Because betrayal requires trust, and enemies don't have your trust. Friends do. This law is not a condemnation of friendship. It's a defense mechanism against blindness. It teaches you to stop pretending, to stop hoping, and to start observing, assessing, and acting strategically. Are you willing to learn? If you want comfort, trust everyone. If you want power, trust wisely. This is just the beginning of law number 2. In the next sections, we'll dive into brutal real-world examples, explore mistakes beginners make, and lay out how to actually use your enemies without being consumed by them. But first, one question. Are you ready to stop being blind and start being dangerous? A lesson in power. Charles XII and the fate of Johann Patkul. He who was once your enemy may be your greatest asset if you learn to play the game. Fail to do so, and you may destroy both him and yourself. In the early 18th century, Europe was a powder keg of power struggles. At the center of one of its most brutal conflicts stood Charles XII of Sweden, a young king brilliant in war, fearless in battle, but blind to one of power's oldest truths. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. Let me tell you a story, not just of war and betrayal, but of misjudged loyalty, emotional blindness, and a catastrophic decision that shook an empire. The enemy-turned-asset, Johann Patkul. Johann Reinhold Patkul was born a nobleman in Livonia, a territory under Swedish rule. From an early age, he clashed with Swedish authority, especially after advocating for the rights of local nobles. The Swedish government branded him a traitor, exiling him and confiscating his lands. But Patkul didn't disappear. He became a sworn enemy of Sweden and traveled across Europe, lobbying rulers and kings to join him in what would become the Great Northern War against Charles XII. At first glance, Patkul seemed like a dangerous adversary, one who should be crushed without mercy. But here's where the story twists. A political pawn in a grand game. By 1704, after years of war, the tides were shifting. Patkul had risen to become a general and diplomat in the service of Augustus II the Strong, Elector of Saxony and King of Poland. As tensions between Augustus and Charles XII escalated, Patkul was sent as an emissary to negotiate with the Swedish king. Here was the moment. Charles XII had a former traitor, a brilliant strategist, well-connected, deeply informed on his enemies, sitting at his table. He could have used Patkul. He could have turned him. He could have leveraged his unique position, an exiled nobleman, desperate to survive, now embedded in the inner circles of his rival. But instead, Charles acted emotionally. The fatal mistake, vengeance over strategy. Charles XII arrested Patkul. He branded him, again, a traitor. And this time, there was no exile. There was only execution. In 1707, Johann Patkul was tortured and executed in one of the most gruesome ways imaginable, broken alive on the wheel, a public display of punishment meant to send a message. But the message backfired. Consequences of the king's blind spot. Charles XII didn't gain strength by eliminating Patkul. Instead, he lost a potential double agent with access to European courts, proved himself vindictive, not strategic, gave his enemies martyr fuel to rally against him, and worst of all, failed to apply law number 2 when it mattered most. In the coming years, Sweden's power crumbled. Charles XII, though courageous on the battlefield, lacked the cunning of a ruler who understood people. He trusted the wrong allies and alienated those who could have become useful, even powerful, assets. The takeaway. Johann Patkul was no saint. But in the world of power, morality is not the highest currency. Leverage is. Charles XII had the chance to turn an enemy into an instrument, to use his knowledge, his ambition, his access. But instead, he sought revenge. He let his ego override his intelligence. And in doing so, he proved exactly why law number 2 exists. Enemies have more to offer than friends, because they have something to prove. If you fail to use them, you waste one of the most powerful tools in the game of power. Deep mechanics behind law number 2. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. At first glance, this law may sound cruel. Why distrust your friends? Why entertain the idea of working with your enemies? But if you're willing to go deeper, beyond morality, beyond emotional comfort, you'll see that this law is not about betrayal, but about strategic clarity. Let's break it down. The illusion of friendship. When people think of power, they often imagine building a circle of loyal friends, surrounding themselves with those they like and trust. But here lies the first trap. Friends bring emotional expectations, not strategic guarantees. They assume you will always help them out. D. Forgive their shortcomings. Choose loyalty over performance. In other words, the closer the friendship, the more emotions interfere with judgment. This leads to nepotism, overlooking incompetence, avoiding difficult conversations, all tolerating disrespect because they're your friend, and most dangerously, trusting someone simply because you like them. That's where power begins to crack. Emotional blind spots. Let's imagine two people. Your friend, who's been by your side for years. Your former rival, who once competed against you but is now proposing to collaborate. Most people will instinctively trust the friend. But here's what actually happens beneath the surface. Friends are more likely to take your generosity for granted. They may envy your success quietly, but never admit it. If they fail or betray you, it hurts more because it was unexpected. You're less likely to notice red flags because you're emotionally attached. In contrast, your enemy is different. They know they're under scrutiny. They understand they must prove themselves to earn trust. They often overperform to win favor or avoid suspicion. There are no illusions in the relationship. It's clear, transactional, strategic. That's the power of using enemies. They are sharper, more motivated, and less likely to act entitled. Power dynamics, control versus comfort. Here's the paradox. With friends, you feel comfortable, but lose control. With enemies, you feel tension, but gain control. When you work with a former rival or enemy, the roles are clearer. You set the terms. You monitor closely. You reward based on performance, not history. They know their position depends on results. That clarity creates accountability. There's no, you owe me. There's only, you earn your place. The risk of friend-based power. Many leaders throughout history fell because they trusted their inner circle too much. Why? Because betrayal never comes from strangers. It comes from those you let closest. Friends have access, insight into your weaknesses, emotional leverage over you, and if they ever feel underappreciated, overshadowed, more deserving than you. They may strike, not out of evil, but out of ego, resentment, or the slow decay of unspoken envy. Friendship is like glass. Once cracked, it never looks the same. And yet, most people only realize that after the damage is done. How enemies can serve you. Enemies, on the other hand, offer unique advantages when used wisely. 1. They know your blind spots. If they've opposed you in the past, they understand how you operate. Bringing them in allows you to see yourself through their lens. 2. They bring credibility. If a former rival endorses you publicly or joins your cause, it signals strength, growth, and often neutralizes other threats. 3. They're hungry to prove loyalty. Precisely because they know their past, they will over-deliver to show they've changed. 4. They balance your echo chamber. Too many friends means too many yes men. An ex-enemy challenges you, sharpens you, and prevents stagnation. So, should you avoid all friends? Number. This law does not say, never have friends, trust no one. It says, don't trust friends blindly. Don't appoint based on emotions. Don't confuse familiarity with competence. Many friends can be loyal allies if they've earned their place through action, not history. The real advice is, evaluate performance over proximity. Build boundaries, even with those you like. Don't ignore someone just because they were once against you. Enemies can become your sharpest tools if you learn how to hold them correctly. Practical applications. Let's bring this into real life. In business, don't hire your friend just because you like them. Hire the one who delivers. If a former competitor offers partnership, don't dismiss them. Study their offer objectively. In team building, mix familiar loyalty with strategic tension. In career, watch how friends behave when you succeed. Envy hides well in smiles. Don't close doors to people who once doubted you. They might respect you now. Use skepticism to keep every relationship in check, not through paranoia, but clarity. In life, ask, would I still work with this person if I met them today? Pay attention to patterns, not promises. Remember, true power doesn't come from trust. It comes from awareness. Final thought. This law is not about fear. It's about mastery. Mastery over your emotions. Mastery over your relationships. Mastery over your judgment. When you stop idolizing friendship and start analyzing value, you stop being manipulated and start being in control. Because in the end, your greatest threat may wear a smile, and your greatest ally may come from the other side of the table. Historical stories, kings, CEOs, politicians. 1. Julius Caesar and Brutus, the ultimate betrayal. Few betrayals have echoed through history like that of Marcus Junius Brutus against Julius Caesar. Brutus was not only a close confidant of Caesar, but also someone whom Caesar treated as a son. Caesar trusted him blindly. He forgave Brutus for past political misalignments and welcomed him into his inner circle during the final years of his life. Yet, when conspirators sought to assassinate Caesar, it was Brutus who joined them and ultimately delivered one of the fatal stabs. Caesar's final words, "Et tu, Brute," reflected not political disappointment, but heartbreak. What makes this story so critical to law number 2 is the blindness that comes from trust based on familiarity. Caesar believed that love and loyalty from Brutus would protect him. But history shows familiarity is not immunity. Those closest to you are often in the best position to destroy you. Friends are emotional. They feel owed. They compare. They expect. When those expectations are unmet, even unknowingly, disappointment turns to bitterness, and bitterness to betrayal. An enemy, by contrast, knows there's no illusion. You see them clearly. You expect resistance, and in that clarity, there's often more reliability. 2. Steve Jobs and the return to Apple. Enemies can be allies. In 1985, Steve Jobs was ousted from Apple, the company he co-founded. after internal power struggles and disagreements with then CEO John Sculley. It was a bitter fall. Jobs left humiliated, and Apple distanced itself from him for over a decade. But in 1996, Apple was in crisis. Desperate for innovation, the company decided to buy Next, Jobs' new company. It was a strategic acquisition, but more importantly, it brought back the very man they once forced out. This wasn't a friendly reunion. Jobs was brought in as an outsider, even an enemy to the current leadership. Yet because he was no longer part of the friendly corporate circle, he had freedom to act. He made bold decisions, restructured the company, cut failed projects, and launched the iMac, setting the stage for Apple's resurrection. The man they rejected saved them, not because of loyalty, but because he had a mission, a clear view of the company's weakness, and nothing to lose. Had Apple relied on friends from within, they would have continued to sink. Jobs, once an enemy, became the savior because he had leverage, perspective, and autonomy. 3. Abraham Lincoln, Team of Rivals, Strategy. When Abraham Lincoln became President of the United States in 1861, he did something unprecedented. He appointed his political rivals to key positions in his cabinet. These were not his allies. Some had publicly ridiculed him. Others saw him as weak or unfit. Yet Lincoln, understanding the stakes of the Civil War, knew he needed strong minds, not loyal flatterers. By surrounding himself with intelligent opposition, Lincoln ensured he was constantly challenged, sharpened, and never allowed to fall into the delusion of invincibility. His cabinet, full of ideological enemies, produced some of the most effective wartime governance in American history. This was not friendship. This was calculated leadership. Lincoln used his enemies as a tool of strength, not to destroy them, but to elevate the system above ego. 4. Louis XIV and the Nobles, Taming the Threat. Louis XIV of France, the Sun King, understood the danger of too much familiarity from noble families. Earlier in his life, the nobles had rebelled against the monarchy in the civil wars known as the Fronde. When Louis took full control, he vowed never again to allow powerful nobles to get close enough to threaten him. His solution? Versailles. He transformed the palace into a glittering prison of gold and pleasure, drawing nobles away from their regional power bases and into a life of courtly games, fashion, and gossip. They became emotionally dependent on proximity to the king, but politically neutered. Louis never gave them real power. He gave them entertainment. The ones who once tried to destroy the monarchy became addicted to its rituals and trapped by their need for favor. This was power, not friendship. Control, not camaraderie. Louis XIV understood, the moment you get too close, you weaken your throne. 5. Howard Hughes and the Silent Fall. Howard Hughes, once one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in America, was known for surrounding himself with yes-men, friends and advisors who never challenged him. Over time, as his mental health declined, no one dared confront him. No one opposed his erratic decisions. They enabled his collapse with their silence. When power is surrounded only by friendly voices, it becomes blind. When no enemy is close enough to push back, the fall is silent, but steep. Yuck. 6. Otto von Bismarck, master of enemy leverage. Bismarck, the architect of modern Germany, was famous for turning enemies into instruments of strategy. He understood the realpolitik of human nature, that alliances shift, and the most valuable relationships are often built from necessity, not affection. He maintained peace in Europe through a web of treaties, many of them with nations once considered hostile. He kept France diplomatically isolated not through loyalty, but through careful balancing of adversarial powers. Friendships fade, interests remain. And in the cold logic of power, enemies who need something from you will often be far more reliable than friends who think you owe them something. Ibon B. Indai Che. Final reflection. From ancient Rome to modern Silicon Valley, from royal courts to startup boards, the same pattern repeats. Friends bring emotional risk. Enemies bring strategic clarity. This is not a call to mistrust everyone. It's a call to understand roles, to separate loyalty from usefulness, and not to let comfort blind you to threats. To use friends wisely, but not naively. To use enemies carefully, but not fearfully. Power respects clarity, not emotion. And the most dangerous trap is assuming that the people who like you will always protect you. They won't. Modern examples: business, politics, media. 1. Elon Musk and the Twitter board. When Elon Musk set his sights on acquiring Twitter, the move was met with resistance from its board of directors. Initially, he was not a friend of the company. He criticized its content moderation, its direction, and its leadership. The board tried to implement a poison pill strategy to stop him. But Musk, the outsider, turned the situation to his advantage. He made a bold public offer, used his following to apply social pressure, and ultimately acquired the platform entirely. What's most interesting is that after the acquisition, Musk did not fill Twitter, now X, with loyal friends. Instead, he fired top leadership, challenged existing structures, and placed people based on strategic alignment, not emotional connection. Even those who had previously opposed him or criticized his views were sometimes invited to join the new direction if they served the mission. In doing so, he turned opposition into leverage. Friends would have brought emotional bias. Former enemies brought perspective. Omwaki O. 2. Donald Trump's 2016 campaign and strategic conflict. Donald Trump's 2016 U.S. presidential campaign broke almost every traditional political rule. He alienated establishment Republicans, battled the media, and positioned himself against both parties. Rather than relying on friends within the system, he used enemies as fuel. Every time an opponent attacked him, a journalist, a senator, a former ally, Trump converted that into narrative energy. They're against me because I'm against the system. Instead of surrounding himself with polished political insiders, he brought in loyal but unpredictable outsiders and sometimes even rivals if they could help him win. His success wasn't built on trust, but on strategic use of conflict. While the long-term effects are controversial, this example clearly shows the power of polarizing leadership that feeds off enemies, not friends. 3. Jeff Bezos and the publishing world. In the early days of Amazon, Jeff Bezos was at war with traditional book publishers. They viewed him as a threat. He was slashing prices, changing distribution models, and breaking monopolies. Many of those publishers refused to work with him. But Bezos didn't try to win them over through friendship. He didn't soften the business model to make peace. Instead, he used the conflict to position Amazon as a revolutionary force, a fighter for the reader, not the industry. Later, some of those same publishing houses returned to the table, forced by market forces to work with the man they once rejected. Bezos leveraged their resistance as validation of Amazon's innovation. Anukatsi. 4. Kanye West and corporate backlash. Kanye West, Yee, is no stranger to controversy. His public feuds with brands like Nike and media outlets have often burned bridges. But rather than seeking forgiveness or clinging to friendly partnerships, Yee has repeatedly turned conflict into momentum. After falling out with Nike over creative control, he partnered with Adidas, an unlikely move given their traditional conservatism. The Yeezy line became one of Adidas's most profitable products. He didn't build that success by appeasing former friends. He used past enemies to fuel a bigger vision. Until the eventual Adidas fallout, his ability to turn corporate tension into cultural relevance showed a clear understanding. Enemies make you visible, friends keep you safe, and when your goal is transformation, visibility matters more than safety. Habestakra. 5. Peter Thiel and Gawker. Peter Thiel, billionaire co-founder of PayPal, was once outed as gay by the online media company Gawker, an act that he considered deeply unethical. Instead of attacking them publicly, he worked behind the scenes for years, funding lawsuits against Gawker. Eventually, his support of Hulk Hogan's defamation case against Gawker led to a $140 million verdict that shut the company down. This wasn't a friend's move. It wasn't emotional. It was cold, strategic vengeance. Thiel didn't confront his enemies directly. He used others to deliver the blow. The lesson: enemies are tools, not just threats. When used with patience and calculation, they're more effective than impulsive friends. NSM. And Dead Store Kananesi. 6. Netflix and Blockbuster. Enemy misjudged. In the early 2000s, Netflix was just a small DVD by mail service. Its founder, Reed Hastings, approached Blockbuster and proposed a partnership, even offering to sell Netflix to them for $50 million. Blockbuster's leadership laughed him out of the room. They viewed Netflix as an insignificant outsider. Years later, Blockbuster was bankrupt, and Netflix had transformed the entire entertainment industry. Hastings didn't try to win friendship. He accepted rejection and used it as a mission. He didn't try to compete with Blockbuster on their terms. He disrupted the system entirely. Enemies who underestimate you give you space to win. Friends who sympathize often distract you from reinventing the game. ORC. Closing insight. In the modern world, where alliances shift daily, trusting friends blindly is a liability. Whether in politics, business, or culture, the same pattern plays out. Enemies make you sharper. Enemies give you narrative. Enemies make you dangerous. Friends ask for comfort. Enemies demand clarity. Mastering this law means letting go of the need to be liked and replacing it with the desire to be effective. You don't need more allies. You need more purpose. And sometimes, your best leverage is the one who once stood against you. Common mistakes of beginners. The second law of power sounds deceptively simple. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. But when beginners try to apply it, they often get it wrong. Why? Because they approach it with emotion, not with strategy. Let's break down the most common mistakes and how to avoid them. First mistake: trusting friends because of the past. Many beginners believe loyalty is eternal. If they helped me before, they'll never betray me, they think. But this is a fantasy. The truth is, people change, their interests shift, and often, betrayal comes from the ones closest to you. Not because they're evil, but because closeness breeds expectation, and expectation unmet turns into resentment. So don't trust based on history. Trust based on current alignment. Second mistake: confusing comfort with safety. Just because you're comfortable with someone doesn't mean they won't hurt you. Friends know your weaknesses. They know how you think, how you react. And under pressure, even the most trusted friend can become a threat. Comfort is not a shield. It's a soft spot. Never assume that just because someone makes you feel safe, they are safe. Vienna. Third mistake: trying to be liked by everyone. This is a trap, especially for beginners. They think influence means being universally liked. But here's the truth. If everyone likes you, you're not doing anything bold. You're not challenging anything. You're not leading. You're pleasing. Real growth creates resistance. Real success attracts enemies. So stop fearing them. Learn to use that resistance as fuel. down. Fourth mistake, burning enemies instead of using them. When a beginner faces opposition, their first instinct is destruction. They want to cancel, block, or silence their enemies. But this law isn't about revenge, it's about leverage. Enemies can sharpen you. They can validate your mission by standing against it. And sometimes, they can even become your strongest allies. So before you react in rage, ask, how can I use this? Fifth mistake, choosing friends over skill. Beginners often give power to people just because they're friends. They think friendship will fill in the gaps of talent, but it won't. Friendship without competence leads to disaster. You need allies who are effective, not just familiar. Respect your friends, love them, but don't hand them the sword if they've never held one. Sixth mistake, using enemies too soon. After reading this law, many beginners rush to use enemies. They try to flip haters into allies or turn conflict into attention. But they don't have the leverage. They don't have the power yet. And in the process, they often create more chaos than strength. This is an advanced tool. Use it when the time is right, not when your ego is loud. Seventh mistake, trusting feelings over facts. Beginners say, he would never betray me. But that's not strategy, that's hope. And hope is a poor defense. Everyone is capable of betrayal under the right circumstances. That's not paranoia, that's awareness. Keep your heart open, but your mind alert. Power demands clarity. Akom. Eighth mistake, expecting quick results. Okay, I distanced myself from friends. I confronted opposition. Why didn't it work? Because this law isn't about instant rewards. It's about positioning. Enemies are long-term tools. Trust is a slow game. If you want quick wins, go play checkers. If you want power, play chess. And chess is slow, calculated, ruthless, beautiful. In the end, beginners make one critical mistake. They think this law is about being cold, about being heartless. It's not. It's about seeing people clearly, not through the lens of emotion, but through the eyes of power. If you learn to do that, you won't just protect yourself. You'll become someone who cannot be played. Practical advice. How to apply law number 2. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. Now that you understand the stories, the psychology, and the common mistakes, the question is, what should you do? Here's a strategic blueprint, a mental protocol for applying this law in real life. Not cold, not manipulative, just clear, tactical action. Mandi dash key. First, audit your inner circle. Start by asking a simple but brutal question. Who around me is here because they're useful? And who is here just because they're familiar? Familiarity is not a qualification. Loyalty isn't always lasting. List the 5 people you rely on most right now. Then ask, are they competent? Are they ambitious? Are they growing with me or slowing me down? This is not about cutting people off. It's about seeing the map clearly before you start the war. Second, watch for entitlement in friends. The closer someone is to you, the more they may start expecting favors, not based on merit, but history. When someone says, after everything I've done for you, that's a red flag. Gratitude is fine, guilt is poison. Power cannot flow where guilt takes root. If your friends start acting like you owe them your success, it's time to set clear boundaries. Third test before you trust. Before giving someone power, test them in low-stakes situations. Do they act with integrity when no one's watching? Do they overreact to feedback? Do they gossip or stay silent? Don't wait for betrayal to be surprised. Force the truth to reveal itself early, before it costs you something important. Fourth, control your reactions to enemies. When you're attacked, criticized, or disrespected, your instinct will be to react emotionally. Don't. Breathe. Detach. Then ask, Is this enemy a threat or an opportunity? Sometimes your enemy is right. Sometimes they give you clarity. And sometimes their very opposition gives you attention, credibility, or a mirror. Enemies are tools if you stop taking them personally. Odi. 5. Use opposition strategically. Once you've built leverage, a solid position, results, reputation, start using resistance. Examples. A former critic endorses your work, massive credibility boost. You quote your enemy's insult and flip it into strength, cash instant virality. You thank someone who betrayed you and watch them squirm. But timing is everything. Don't play this game too early. It only works when your position is unshakable. Emoji. 6. Protect your reputation silently. Never explain yourself emotionally. Never beg for understanding. When you act, act with finality. When you speak, speak with intention. Make them wonder what you're planning. Mystery equals control. And in power, silence is louder than noise. Akapomama. 7. Don't go full paranoia. This is a dangerous trap. You read this law and suddenly think, I can't trust anyone. Everyone's out to get me. That's weakness disguised as insight. You can trust, but trust slowly, trust conditionally, and trust with eyes open. Paranoia will isolate you. Awareness will elevate you. Nah. 8. Keep friends for loyalty, not leadership. Your closest friends don't always need to be your business partners. Let them support your spirit, not run your empire. Let them lift you emotionally, not manage your legacy. This balance will save both your power and your friendship. 9. Upgrade your circle without guilt. You will outgrow people, and when you do, don't shrink yourself to keep them comfortable. You're not betraying anyone by evolving. Just make sure you don't drag the past into your future. 10th, study power without losing humanity. The greatest danger of this law is becoming too cold. Power is a sharp sword, but a sword is useless without a steady hand. Learn the rules. Play the game, but never forget who you are underneath the armor. In the end, this law is not about manipulation. It's about clarity. See the world not as you wish it was, but as it truly is. See people not as friends or enemies, but as moving pieces on a board. And most importantly, learn how to move first. We all want to believe that trust is sacred, that friendship is pure, that loyalty guarantees safety. But life, and especially power, doesn't operate on hope. It operates on patterns. And those patterns are ancient. Throughout history, kings fell not because their enemies broke through, but because their friends broke trust. Trust is fragile. Familiarity breeds blindness. And emotions often cloud judgment. That's why this law feels uncomfortable. It challenges the narrative we've been told since childhood. Keep your friends close. Trust them with everything. Loyalty is everything. But here's what this law really teaches. Don't confuse comfort with competence. Don't mistake shared history for shared ambition. And don't hand over power just because someone stood next to you for a long time. Your path to growth will create resistance. Not all your friends will celebrate you. Not all your allies will stay allies. Some will drift. Some will resent you. And some will try to control you through guilt. That's not evil. That's human. But your job is not to judge them. Your job is to see clearly. Power is not about domination. It's about clarity. And clarity tells you this. A loyal friend is a blessing. A useful enemy is a weapon. A blind spot in your circle is a risk. And trust, once broken, never comes back whole. That doesn't mean you live paranoid. It means you build slowly, intentionally, strategically. You trust by observing. You forgive without forgetting. You prepare for betrayal, not because you expect it, but because you understand it's part of the game. Power is not cold, but it's always aware. Asan. Money, Ray. And when it comes to enemies, this law reminds us of something rare. Your enemies may become your greatest allies because they understand something most friends don't. They had to earn their place. And sometimes, mutual respect born from conflict is stronger than blind loyalty born from comfort. Akakuha niya nas. So here's the final truth. Don't trust blindly. Don't fear strategically. Don't hand over control to anyone who hasn't proven they can carry it. You are the general of your empire, even if your empire is still being built. Protect the throne before the crown even arrives. Law number 2 isn't about fear. It's about vision. And in a world where power shifts fast, vision is everything. If you're the kind of mind that sees beneath the surface, stay. Because this isn't just another channel, it's a library of power. A place where ideas sharpen like blades, and silence speaks louder than noise. Subscribe, not for entertainment, but for preparation. Law number 3 is already waiting, and it reveals something no one wants to admit. Conceal your intentions. Most people talk too much. You will learn how to say less and control more. See you in the next chapter.